welcome everybody. Really what I wanted to kind of talk about today is getting back to basics on an effective response capability, what you should know as a defender, how can you structure a response from not just policies and planning, but really getting into the nitty gritty and really exercising that capability on a continual basis. By way of introduction, my name is Jerry Johansson. I'm the Principal Security Solutions Specialist here at Red Canary. Work inside customer-focused, inside developing detection and response solutions. Been in the industry about a decade now, came out of law enforcement, and I am located in Rapid City, South Dakota. So if you're outside the United States, it's one of the square ones in the middle. To set the stage, though, let's go ahead and talk real quick about what and where we are. What are we talking about here? We're talking about responding to an attack in progress, an attack that's completed, a ransomware attack, as we're seeing right now. There's organizations right now that are working in this as we speak, as we talk about this during a webinar. When I first started in cybersecurity and in the incident response space, we really had this foothold to impact measured in days and sometimes years. You think about the original APT style attacks, it was, they were going to be in the network for 90 days, mapping everything low and slow, and then actually go ahead and gather the data they want and exfil it out. That's changed. Ransomware, we're now talking about hours. I have up here something from SecureWorks that shows that dwell time hits a low of 24 hours. The attackers continue to adapt. They adopt new techniques, new tactics, new tools. You saw how quickly, for example, our threat actors pivoted from macro-enabled Microsoft Office documents into something else. Whether it's mark of the web attacks or link files, something of that nature. We're seeing a combination of scripted and human-directed attack tactics. This has really made it much easier for them to move faster, as opposed to putting somebody behind the keyboard at the initial stages of an attack. This can be scripted. They can go out and sit in front of a console, Cobalt Strike console, and see all of the systems come pouring in as they start to move around. As much as we would like it to not be, defenses are not 100% effective. There are times where we just don't have the ability to block something. We don't even know that there's an attack. Think about a 0 day, right? It's not 100% effective. And really, we cannot wait for all of the information to come in. This is another thing that we've been looking at too, is, how do we get to at least some sort of isolation and containment process without all of the information? We don't necessarily need that root cause. All we really need is some information to start blocking and taking care and kicking out the threat actor as they're moving through the environment. So we're going to color our discussion with these points, is that we really have this situation where we don't necessarily have a lot of breathing room. Threat actors are much faster now. So we have this situation where we really need to focus on not if a threat actor is able to get in, but when would they might likely get in, and how would we respond to them? So it's really going to color our discussion. There's a concept, though, that we want to keep in mind, and that is we want to put a lot of effort keeping left of the boom. And what does that mean? Well, this is drawn from physical security and even some military and law enforcement activities. Is we really want to make sure that we focus a lot of that energy that we have, that time we have, and the resources we have to making sure that we are prepared for an incident. And that's that boom. That's that all of a sudden you get a call that says they have a ransomware node on their desktop, or they have some other issue that they need to take care of. So we're going to focus a lot of this. We are going to go into a little bit about how we detect, but really the focus of building an effective response capability is making sure that we put a lot of effort, a lot of our resources into that left of the incident, that making sure that we are fully prepared to do that. And there's a combination of things that we're going to build on that are going to keep us left of boom. And these are the 5 things we're going to talk about. As you can see, we've got some that are left of boom. Sometimes when we talk early detection, we're talking right at that, being able to make sure that we're right up to that delta, that we understand what is actually happening. We're going to talk about planning. What does planning constitute? How do we build that out as a capability in our own organization? I hope that this webinar and the information I'm giving, even if you have an incident response plan, even if you have all of these things together, it gives you 1 or 2 things to add, maybe cut some fat where it's not needed. Early detection, this is another key point, is Red Canary spends all of our time really on that early detection piece. How close can we get to that first sign that we have problems? And we're going to talk about that, how you can bring that into your own organization and really unify it. Communications. We often see challenges with different teams working together. And that's what we want to talk about today, is how do we break down those silos and build out those communications channels, those direct lines from, say, your security operations center to your network operations, your identity and access management team, your desktop team. How do we put this into action? We're going to talk about it, acting aggressively, as one of our key pieces here, one of the key elements that we're going to do. But all of these really don't have any impact on an actual incident unless we exercise, unless we drill. So we're also going to kind of round out this discussion with an understanding of what we can do from a drilling and exercise perspective. This is at the individual level, this is at the team level, and this is the team of teams level that we're going to talk about this. The aim here is to give everybody something to pivot off of, something that may be able to take into their own organization. If you take one nugget or the entire thing, it's been a success. But to really think about getting back into the basics, the foundational elements of incident response, and developing that incident capability within your organization, this is what we're going to focus on. So we're going to kind of go back into history a little bit. This is a quote by Dwight Eisenhower, and I generally don't like to read off slides, but I am going to read this one. In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Dwight Eisenhower and his staff planned probably arguably the largest invasion in the history of mankind to free Europe in 1944. And I think this is a really good sentiment for where we are. Is oftentimes what happens is that incident response plan that we crafted 6 months ago, when something kicks off, we may dust it off. We may not even take a look at it. But all of the work that we put into planning, all of that thought into, hey, what would we do if we found compromised credentials? What would we do if we found a threat actor was using remote desktop as a lateral movement technique? All of that is indispensable. All of that factors into everything you want to do from a response capability standpoint. So at a high level, we really are focusing on strategic and operational. So if you think about planning on three core levels, maybe 4 if you want, at the high level, at the strategic level, is our incident response policy. This is a short document. This is our high level. This is how we approach incident response. This is how we go about doing specific actions, meaning point directly to your incident response plan in the policy. Again, short, but it says this is our commitment to it. One of the key elements of your incident response policy, that strategic document, that 1 to 2 pager, is your authority to act. Who has the authority to make certain decisions? One of the pitfalls that sometimes hits incident response teams and other responders is they have to reach out to other teams. It's a lot of inter-team coordination. And if there's not a direct line between, say, the incident commander or the chief security officer to turn to the identity and access management team and say, I need you to disable these 10 accounts because they're being used for lateral movement. If that authority to act is not in there and it's not been clearly defined, it increases the amount of time to adequately resolve that issue. So thinking back to our very early discussion about dwell time, how fast actors are moving, we can't have this kind of zigzag line all the way to the incident commander and the identity and access management team. So we need that authority to operate. And really the policy just really helps us meet compliance requirements. We create an incident response plan, associated playbooks, workflows, all the associated documentations, training to meet these compliance requirements, whether they're HIPAA, PCI, anything from the European Union, anything that we really have to make sure we meet. So if you think of that policy as the strategic level, at the operational level is our incident response plan. On the right-hand side of here, we've got the Incident Response and Readiness Guide, second edition. Good resource for really kind of understanding this operational level. Roles and responsibilities, that's a big thing. We talked about that authority to operate and act during an incident. Roles and responsibilities are also key. Who's responsible for performing network containment? Who's responsible for escalating a detection? All of those things kind of come into that operational level incident response plan. Also key actions during the incident lifecycle. Now, one of the challenges with crafting an incident response plan is hitting kind of a Goldilocks zone. If you think back to the fairy tale Goldilocks, can't be too hot, can't be too cold. It's got to be just right. Can't be too soft, can't be too hard. It's got to be just right. You don't want to get too technical and detail-oriented with your incident response plan. You don't want to start talking about specific commands that you would run on switching. You wouldn't want to talk about specific firewall rules. What you really want to focus is on more of those higher-level tasks. Containment. We would contain at the firewall. We would contain at identity and access management. We would use Windows Defender for isolation. Those are the kind of things that we want to really have on an incident response plan, because of those technical aspects. We're actually going to push lower into our tactical and technical level planning. So if you think about it, you got to hit that Goldilocks zone. If it's too rigid, it's going to be unusable. If it's too light and not enough detail, it's going to be unusable. So you have to hit that Goldilocks zone. So I talked about strategic is that policy. That policy outlines our strategic objectives about incident response. Putting that strategy into place is our operational incident response plan. Now we work into the tactical and technical. We're going to start with the tactical at the lower end is playbooks. At that tactical levels, they're going to integrate some workflows. And what are workflows? Those are atomic level actions that we take. This is the actual command that you would run, the actual IOC you would extract from Windows event logs. These are going to coordinate people, process, and technology. The Security Operations Center analyst will take Windows security event logs or sysmon logs, analyze them for IOCs using whether it's Hayabusa or Timeline Explorer or any number of tools to actually pull out those indicators. That playbook takes those atomic level actions and integrates them into a series of workflows. As you see on the right-hand side, we would have, say, a playbook around ransomware investigation, and it would walk us through the process of all of those atomic level tasks, from isolating the endpoint, extracting some evidence, identifying lateral movement, identifying initial compromise, and then what would we do from eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. So you can see how all of these are starting to pull together. So to kind of give it round out that discussion, we've got a strategic level with our policy. The policy outlines our strategy. What do we want to accomplish? Operationally, we have our incident response plan that tries to meet that objective, and try to meet that strategy. Executing parts of the incident response plan are those playbooks, which include all of the very technical level actions. So all of this planning all comes together. But once we have all of this, we don't just wash our hands and go back to work. We need to stress test this plan before we even put it into production. So one of the things I recommend is it's what's called a table read. This is the entire IR team. And it is just like if you were making a movie, you sit down with all of the actors, the producers, the director around a giant table, get some nice pastries and coffee, and you go through the policy and plan as a sanity check. Does this make sense? Does this role even exist in the organization? And that way you can move from a draft into a much, much more rounded out, much more polished set of documents. So you've got your policy, your IRP, and all of your different plan workflows and playbooks clearly defined in that table read. So we've got a polished, maybe it's our first draft of our incident response plan and all of the associated documentation. Then we're going to go into a pre-mortem. And all this is a very informal 1 to 2 hour workshop. And what we do is we look at, hey, how could all of this come apart? How could this fail? And what we look at is all of the different things that would make the incident response plan workflows, the playbooks fail. And then we adjust them as needed. So for example, you may have part of your playbook, a workflow around accessing a remote site. And one of the failure points you could say is, what if the tech that we send out there to eradicate or re-image the system forgets the keys? You know, there's a lock, there's a cipher lock, but surrounding the site is a chain link fence with a padlock on that. Do we have the combination? Do we have the key? Something as simple as that gets folded in there. So you make sure that when things actually kick off, that your plan really addresses those kind of unforeseen circumstances. So think about this as kind of looking at the worst case scenario and planning through that. So we have a good solid plan. We've got a really robust, we've table read it, and we've gone through and stress tested. It's now in publication. Now we need to focus on early detection. Proper system coverage. When I first started in this industry, it was antivirus. That first generation, it would tell you, yeah, I got a virus. You got to figure out another way to get it, or pulling logs into a SIM was fairly difficult. What we have now is a whole host of detection and response tools, from endpoint detection, Microsoft Defender, to extended detection, Microsoft Defender XDR, all of those XDR providers out there. We even have cloud detection around the cloud plane in terms of how we can actually see somebody authenticating into our Azure portal or attempting to use some compromised API or other types of keys to get into web apps or even into containers. We have that type of data. And then maybe so you round that out with some selected logging, pulling into an event management system. Proper system coverage is a continual process. We got to continually update this and make sure we understand that where we have visibility in. Don't overlook common techniques. I threw up the threat detection report here. You look at how many living off the land binaries are part of that threat detection. As used as common techniques, as common as just dropping PowerShell into your environment and trying to move around, gain some sort of persistence. This is one of the things to focus on that early detection is as new threats drop, as new techniques drop. It's time to continually update that process to make sure that you're really focused on early detection. If you're hitting even just right after the bang, right after that boom, we see, the execution of encoded PowerShell script versus ransomware. Obviously, that is the focus there. Incident communications. There's a phrase that's used often in crisis communications that you would see, say, in emergency management circles. So if there's a hurricane or an earthquake, a typhoon, something of that nature. We use a phrase called common operational picture, and that is essentially denotes that everybody involved in the incident understands the incident from a common set of facts and circumstances. So that's what we do with our internal stakeholders, is strive for a common understanding of the incident. As bad as it is, strive for that common understanding of the incident, no matter what the situation. If it is a full-on encrypted environment and the impact is going to be catastrophic for the next 2 weeks, as bad as that is, it's better to get that out right now so that you can move forward with all of the technical and operational tasks that you need to do. So internal stakeholders, all the way from the leader of your organization, whether that be a CEO, whether it be a director. If you're in the public sector, it very well may be political entities. They need to understand what the incident is. And this requires really thoughtful communication. It really definitely needs to be something that needs to be communicated. Understand that impact. If it's a dramatic impact, if there's something that's really bad in the environment, we need to know about that. Don't sugarcoat anything. It's not something to obfuscate or sugarcoat. Understand and get that common operational picture. With external stakeholders, right, we have regulatory requirements. Right, you may have, for example, in the United States, we recently just had a new rule come from the Securities and Exchange Commission that they need to be notified if it's data related to a material breach. So those are compliance requirements. It's one thing to get through an incident and minimize that impact. It's another to get through an incident, minimize the impact, and realize that regulatory bodies, from banking regulators, securities regulators, utility regulators, are now going to come in and fine you because you neglected to make those incidents known to them in an appropriate amount of time. Same thing with third-party obligations. You're downstream and you're doing, say, part of the supply chain. You're in that. What third-party obligations do you have? Maybe what third-party obligations do your providers have to you? For example, you may have no idea that your HVAC vendor or potentially another service vendor that you have that's providing support has an obligation to you, and they're breached and they don't notify you. Plenty of resources in crafting a message that adequately captures external stakeholder communications. Again, this is one of those areas where you may have to talk. If you're in the technical area, if you're at the operational area, you may have to put this on another team within your organization to craft this message. And generally, that's the recommendation. If you have a marketing and communications department, you have a customer success or customer management group, all of those things can be brought to bear. Same thing with regulatory requirements. Good time to bring in, if you have corporate counsel in-house or you're outsourcing. They'll be much better able to understand what the requirements are and actually meet those requirements. All right, so let's kind of check where we are. We've talked a lot about planning, talked a lot about early detection. What do we do from a communication standpoint? And then we'll move into deliberately and decisively. When I was in the military long ago, we used to have a saying: if you're going to screw something up, do it aggressively. Not necessarily 100% applicable here. We don't necessarily want to just start pulling cables out of the back of firewalls or switches, but if we are going to do something, we need to do it deliberately and decisively. Again, drawing on that rapid threat actor behavior that's out there, we really need to act deliberately and decisively. So this means addressing key actions. That is incident escalation procedure. And that is one of the key, just right off the bat. You need to be able to take an incident out of the, say, detection engineer's hand or the security operations center hand and get it as judiciously to the incident response team. I say judiciously, not quickly. Quickly denotes that we're going to be a little bit sloppy here, but we need to pass on to them the key information that they need. What was it? Was it a detection? Where was it? What was the IP address? Domain name? What system was it on? We need to really, really, really act decisively around isolation and containment. And one of the things you can do when you're talking isolation containment is having a discussion beforehand. What would be the impact if we had to contain a specific land segment? What is the operational impact? And how do we balance that against what is going to be the impact from a threat actor's perspective if we didn't do that? These are some of the things that you want to preload and pre-can these decisions automatically. So for example, if you have web infrastructure, this is a conversation we had several years ago with Log4j. What if we find that we have exploitable Log4j servers and we need to repair them and take them offline? Then have that conversation. And that's what I'm saying about planning for key actions. Already have that. If make it as simple as a mathematical formula. If it happens, this is what we're going to do. We're going to automatically isolate if we find that we're vulnerable, if we see any signs of exploitation. Same thing with eradication and recovery. One of the worst things to have happen to your organization is a complete, the keys to the kingdom, a complete domain compromise through the exfiltration of identity and access management credentials. How do you plan for that? Plan for those key actions. Do you need to do a global password reset? If the ntds.dit file is compromised, what does that look like? What is the impact? How would we actually go about that? One of the key takeaways from this is key actions. You don't want to necessarily have to have that discussion during an incident. If it is a key decision, make sure you preload that. Make sure you have some understanding of what the potential impact could be and already have those pre-canned. When it comes to isolation and containment, if you can move decisively and shut down the threat actor within a couple of hours, you minimize the impact. But you also have to know what the impact of operations are. Have the authority to take action. Understand the situation and have the authority to take action. This goes back to our policy discussion, is we can't wait at 2:00 in the morning if we have an incident to get somebody up from the network operations team, for example, and let them get up, get an understanding of the situation, get dialed in on the VPN, start working. That may take 20, 30, maybe 40 minutes. Think about the damage that could occur in 30 to 40 minutes with what we just discussed at the very onset of this. Here is the other real kind of underlying sentiment with acting deliberately and decisively. There are no perfect solutions. There are only trade-offs, all right? Any action we take is going to have an impact on operations. But we balance that with what is the potential impact of a ransomware attack. So if we lose our ability to process, say, credit card transactions for 6 hours, what's our impact? You may be talking millions of dollars. But what do we trade that off if we stop a ransomware attack in progress that may take that system down for 2 weeks? It's a fairly easy decision to make right now. So again, this requires a lot of pre-planning and wargaming these things out. That kind of brings us into our next discussion, is drilling and training. One of the challenges we have in detection and response, that incident response, is how do we train our people? I'm a big fan of a number of different training providers out there, and a lot of organizations, what they do is they'll send their team, the security operations team, to say a network forensics or endpoint forensics and response course. And they learn extensive amount of skills. They may understand a lot more higher level concepts. Here's the problem, is if you send that individual, say March 1st, say they leave tomorrow for a week-long training. And they get back, and training is like a banana. It's really good, but it goes bad really quick. So if you think about March, that first week of March, and then we're in July or August and the incident happens, how much of that skill set that they built up in March are they retaining? So training should focus on concrete skill development, just like we said, that first week of March, that's where our concrete skills and knowledge are built in. We're getting that training. We're popping them out of the sock for a week to get that. But what we need to do is conduct continual training throughout the year. We need to put them through exercise. We need to put them through understanding what specific attacks look like. This is where something like Atomic Red Team can come in really handy. This is a free open source tool. And essentially what it can do is allow you to see attacks. It'll allow you run it on an endpoint and see what event logs are created, see what kind of data is put out onto that system, and see if you can pull it with any number of tools that you're using. But we're talking about maybe 10, 15 minutes once a week, maybe twice a week, where you can run a test, turn to that SOC analyst and say, hey, I want you to go pull all the Windows event logs off this system. I ran an atomic test, see if you can find it. See if you can find the bad in that. And it's really just about continual training throughout the year. So if you think about it, an Atomic Red Team test once a week, it's 10, 15 minutes. You get to work through that process. You get to work through that training, and you also get to work through those playbooks and workflows by doing them. So that really focused on that individual through some continual training. Next thing are exercises. We're going to take those individual skills, and we're going to start looking at exercises. Probably the most familiar exercise out there is a tabletop. A lot of organizations do this at the end of the year. They bring in somebody, an outsider. I've done a lot myself, where you come in and you run the entire team through a scenario. So we're taking a lot of those individual skills and we're building on those individual skills. We're also seeing how the team of teams, your identity and access management team, your network operations team, your executive committee, how they all work and coordinate with, say, the security operations center or the incident response team. But what I want to do is say, instead of doing this once a year where we have to pull in all of these individuals into a giant room or a giant Zoom, what we want to do is really look at doing these throughout the year. And I'm not saying like the training, we got to do this weekly, but let's talk about kind of what a construct would look like, putting a lot of this training together. So I talked about that atomic testing, that detection, validation, and threat identification. This is what we run, say, with our security operations team, maybe once a week, 10 minutes, run a test, pick a test out of, say, a threat intelligence report, a briefing that came through, whatever source you're using for maybe open source threat intelligence. See if you can match up a technique from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, run it, see what the security ops team does with it. Does your EDR, your XDR detect it? Great. How would you respond to it? If it doesn't, are you able to pull evidence off of that system to identify the threat? Are they able to go through Windows event logs or maybe Sysmon or something of that nature? Then we go into atomic drilling. This is a short duration drill. So we take maybe that atomic testing, we look at atomic drilling. Let's fire off an Atomic Red Team test or some sort of threat emulation, maybe using Caldera, for example, and say, okay, what would we do if we saw this activity? What does our workflow look like? Do we isolate the endpoint? Do we contain that LAN segment? Is it even an issue that we need to immediately escalate? Is it just some suspicious activity that we need to address? Really what we're answering here is, can we respond properly? Once a month, if you did this once a month, take your security operations team and started to do these once a month and make sure that those playbooks and workflows are working well together. And then finally, as we start to move through, are the tabletop and the capstone exercises. Our tabletop is what you normally would look at. We want a full life cycle scenario, meaning we want to build a scenario that takes into account not only our analysis, but how we would respond to information we pull from that analysis. How would we take IOCs? How would we take specific TTPs that we've identified? The focus here is on how our teams coordinate activities together. How does the identity and access management team work with the security operations and incident response team to disable credentials? How do we work with network operations? How do we work with, say, firewall, or maybe the DevOps or cloud team if we're responding to something maybe like a container escape? We're focused here on coordination. This is really good for that incident response plan. It's really good to validate a lot of those actions that we take in the incident response plan and all of that coordination that goes into it. And then finally, a capstone exercise. This could be a real world scenario. If you have a breach and attack sim, something of that nature, we're looking at a full spectrum response. The best resource for a capstone exercise, maybe 3 to 5 days per year, is marrying up your work, all of the things that you've done from a training perspective, into a purple team exercise. You see a lot of organizations will say that a tabletop is great for exercising those things within the incident response plan. But if we're thinking about it, it's kind of like batting practice or just taking shots on an empty goal in soccer. What we want to do with our capstone exercise is work as closely we can with a real world scenario and really go through our full spectrum response. Training here is really to kind of build on those 4 things that we already talked about, but it really is getting out of this modality of a yearly tabletop exercise or maybe a yearly training class and moving into an easily digestible construct. This is not a lot of time when you look at it to really start building motor muscle memory into a lot of the incident response and incident tasks that we have to go through. Adam, did you want to say anything before we move on to any questions?
No, that was great. Just if anyone out there is curious, has incident response queries, wants to learn more about readiness, you can go to our website, redcanary.com, or you can also submit a request for a free readiness demo at redcanary.com/personal demo. And then, of course, we uploaded a bunch of complimentary resources for you all, so definitely look at those before you leave us.
Okay, we have time for questions. I'm going to go. So we have. Let me see if I can find one here. So one of the things that's asked is, we have an incident response and readiness guide. We also conduct readiness exercises as part of Red Canary. That is a service we offer our customers. So if you are interested in that, you can reach out. This is whether or not you are one of our MDR or XDR customers, or you really want it as a standalone platform. We conduct readiness exercises for a whole host of organizations. These are some resources too that you can actually pull some additional context out. The one that I'm really, if you really want to get into that more technical atomic red team test, is that Train Hard, Fight Easy. That is a really deep dive into actually running these, how to track them, how to pull things out. That really kind of focuses on that technical level of incident response. Are there any other questions that I can answer?
I think we got a quiet audience today.
Yeah. Well, I will say my email address is up there. If you think of something, if there's something that piqued your curiosity with this, please let me know. Be happy to talk to you about it. Obviously, use these resources. Atomic Red Team is another one that is a really solid resources. It's free and open source, and feel free to use it. At that, I thank everybody for attending, and I hope you walked away with maybe 1 or 2 things or a whole bunch of things to start working on. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, everyone.